Welcome to those that have just joined us. There may be a few more, but let's get started in the view of keeping pretty much on time. So I'll share over to the PowerPoint in just a moment and get us started. I'm very, very happy to have you ask questions or make comments as we're going through. I'm here to help in any way that I can, help you grow and develop and shed some light on what's happening around leadership development. But first, let's get started, and we'll start with an acknowledgement of country. So we respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the land in which I am in right now in Hawthorn in Melbourne, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And it would be great for you to just put into the chat where you are coming from at the moment, wherever you're located as you're listening to this masterclass webinar. And of course, you're all here so that we can help you to be at your very best as a leader and help you to identify whether you're on the fast track or the typical slow track to becoming your best as a leader. And I'll outline some key steps that we've defined as being proven ways to be at your very best as a leader and get you onto that fast track. So let's jump right into it and keep going. So who is this for? Who is this really going to work for? And this is for managers. And as we're going through this, really think about which ones of these apply to you or to maybe people or someone in your organization. So it's those who want to really fast track their leadership development and leadership effectiveness so they can be at their best as quickly as possible and still want to have a balanced life as well as a successful career. So really making sure that life balance is part of what they want to achieve. To be able to feel confident in themselves as a leader consistently throughout their career. And to have multiple exciting career options, have many options as to where you want to go with your career. And also want to be able to spend more quality time with family and friends and not just feel like your time is all consumed by work. So just have a look at those and again, put into the chat which are the ones that apply to you. Or if there's something else that you'd like to ask about or something else that is relevant for you as to why you're here, please put that into the chat as well. So let's see what we've got coming up in the chat here. Okay, so we've got a couple of people put in where they're coming from. So let me know, how do you fit into some of these categories? Is this something that you're looking for to fast track your leadership, to have life balance? Pop into the chat there. So tell me a little bit more about what you're looking for out of today's program. Work-life balance? Great, thank you. So that's something that we definitely want to focus on as we're going through. All right, well, we'll keep going with that in mind. As I said, please feel free to jump in and ask questions at any time. Okay, so this is not for everyone, all right? So if you really love being involved in doing all of the work yourself, then this is not going to be the type of approach that's going to work for you. Or if you prefer to be the one who stays in control, that's important for you in your approach, then this is not going to be the approach for you. Some people don't want to be a manager or a leader, so it's probably not for you if you're in that category as well and if you don't want to manage people. I think we've got people here who want to be managers and leaders. We've got a few more people just joining us. I'll add those in. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. So I first became a manager in my late 20s and had nearly 20 years in management. I didn't have any training when I first got into management, like a lot of people, just jumped into the role. And I made lots of mistakes, although I didn't really realize how many mistakes I was making at the time. So I was slowly getting better through trial and error. I thought I was doing really well with some things, but it turned out that there were some times where I wasn't doing so well. And I worked long hours, putting in a lot of effort for a long time. And eventually I got some leadership training and coaching. And then in less than a year, I improved more than I had in the previous 7 years because of the way that I was able to be much more focused in what I was doing as a leader. And then others started to ask me to help them and coach them and help them improve. So I ended up actually moving out of corporate and going into being a leadership coach and doing leadership development and facilitation. And I've trained over 5,000 people now in leadership and coached over 300 managers. And I've helped those managers to work less hours and have a balanced life, and yet still hit their targets, get promoted, earn more, and have a highly motivated, high-performing team. And all of that leads them to having an increased job satisfaction. Okay, so here's some things that are really interesting about some research that I've been doing myself. Okay, when I ask people about rating themselves out of 10 as a manager and how they've been performing over the last year or so, right, where 1 is really struggling, overwhelmed, overloaded, 10 is them at their very best, not perfect, but them at their very best. What I've got is that most people rate themselves between 3 and 6 out of 10. Okay, so they're doing an okay job, sometimes a poorish job, sometimes it's up and down. All right, and yet when I say to these people, do you want to be at your best? 96% of them say, yeah, of course, I want to be 8 to 10 out of 10 every day, as many days as I can. But I don't know how to get there. I don't know how to achieve that. And so that's what I started looking at in terms of putting together, how can I help people to get to being 8, 9, 10 out of 10 on a more consistent basis? So most managers find themselves in this sort of a situation. Okay, you get into the job and you're trying to do the very best you can to do the job, and you find yourself saying, it's easier to do it myself. Or when I do it, I know it'll be done right. Okay, so tell me, again, put into the chat, please, who sometimes has these things going through their mind? So who there says something like, oh, it's just easier if I do it myself, or a version of that? Yep, Matthew, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. According to the people that I speak to and all the people that I go through with the surveys and the research that I'm doing, this is something that is very, very common. Most managers, especially in the first up to 5 years of them being in management roles, and for some for much longer, they find themselves in this situation where they're saying these things to themselves and thinking these things. Okay. Unfortunately, what this means is that you're not going to be at your best. It actually means that you're sabotaging yourself from being at your very best as a leader. Okay. So the challenge is, what do you do differently? And we'll get to that in a moment. And here's some other things, some other traps that many managers, and I experienced all of this, I did all of these myself, so I know I've been in a situation of making all of these mistakes. So do you sometimes protect your team from failure by stepping in and fixing their situation? Do you sometimes give your team members answers to all the questions? Maybe you always do that. So one of the things that I did was like, I want to keep them moving, keep them doing stuff. So I just give them all the answers that they need and they ask for. Okay, do you tell people exactly what they need to do to complete their tasks so you think that they're done exactly the way you want them to be done? Do you find that you get extremely busy responding to requests, emails, interruptions, issues and messages, and that's just what's happening all day, every day, and you don't get time to step back and be strategic and think about how to add more value? Well, these are some of the things that you need to stop doing if you want to be at your very best and highly effective as a leader. So let me hear from you again. I'm going to stop the sharing, get you to type into the chat for just a moment. What are some of the ones here that you're doing? Because again, these are the things that most people are doing every day as leaders. Are you doing any of these? Okay, thank you. So we've got someone saying, give too many instructions when explaining. Thanks, Matthew. And then Mel says, I get caught up in 4, which finding that you're extremely busy all the time responding to requests, which probably means that you've got caught up in doing some of 1, 2, and 3 or something like that, and not finding enough time to be strategic and add value, right, which is critical to be at your very best. All right, thank you for sharing that. We'll keep going. So these seem like they are the right things to do, but actually they're not, okay? So we've got to do some things quite significantly differently, otherwise it will have a negative impact. And one of the things that can quickly lead to is burnout. So how did this happen? How did we get to be like this in the way that managers are experiencing things? And again, I'm talking based on all of my research and research out there by the Center for Creative Leadership, and by the Neuro Leadership Institute, and by Gartner, and by many other organizations that are doing research around leadership. They're all saying similar things to what I'm experiencing with the people that I'm working with. And how this happens is that because essentially there's two ways that people get to be in management roles. They get thrown in the deep end, which is what happened to me, okay? Usually because they're the person that's been there the longest or the person with the subject matter expertise, and then they get put into the management role and expected to just figure it out and to be a great manager because you have experience, because you're the expert. And then there can also be some reliance on some leadership training courses. Okay. Now that seems quite simple and quite logical, but here's the problem with these situations. All right. When you get thrown in the deep end, this essentially means you're using a trial and error method, which is what I went through and is what most people go through when they first get into the management positions. Okay. Because most people get into a management position without any leadership or management training to start with. So they fall into the category of going, it's easier to do it myself. Usually the person with the most experience, with the most expertise, all right, I'll do the things the way that I did when I was a high-performing team member. And so then it's easy to do it myself rather than trying to get somebody else to do it. Maybe because they don't have the same experience, maybe because I'm just not sure if they're going to do it the same way that I would. Okay. And unfortunately, this leads to poor leadership. It's a good way to do it if you want to stay the person who's the expert, and it's not a good way to do it if you want to be a great leader and manager and you want to have a high-performing team, okay, and you want to have lots of career options. So what happens with training courses? Now, training courses have lots of good content. I've run many of them over the years, okay? But there's one big challenge with the training courses. There's no ongoing support. And the research shows that people remember less than 9% of the content a month after the training. That's of the total content. So they remember very little, and that doesn't actually include what they actually implement. So most of the time when they're trying to implement it, it seems harder than when they had the training, and so they give up and go back to their old habits. Okay. So let's hear from some people who, again, take yourself off mute or put into the chat. Who's been to a training course? How many people have the opportunity to go to some training courses? And how much do you remember of the content in the training courses? How much have you specifically put into place that you're using consistently every day? Who can share something with us?
Hi, Michael.
Matthew, yes.
Yeah, I've attended a couple of leadership training courses. I tend to remember the sorts of kind of leadership modules we study, but yeah, very little of the detail, and I can't say that I'm sort of actively implementing a lot of it consciously.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for sharing, Matthew. You've just described what 90% of people describe about going through the courses. And people love them when they're in them, and there is good material, good content. The challenge is, are we implementing what we're learning? Okay, so thank you for sharing, Matthew. We'll continue on. So I'll go back to sharing. We want to get to the point now where we're showing you what we need to do next. Okay. So what to do instead? Well, first thing is to do is to think of your leadership development as a set of skills that you need to practice and improve. Okay, it's skills that you need to learn, and you can think of it. The easiest way I found with working with people is to think of it like you're learning to play something like the guitar, or learning to do something new like dance or play tennis. Okay. And the extent to however high performing you want to be, you can apply that across these areas to people who want to be really, really good at musical instrument or a guitar, or dancing, or you can apply it to how people get to be at the highest level possible in professional sports, like playing tennis. Okay, so the people who are the very best at tennis, what do? They get themselves a coach who can help them work on their skills and develop their skills so that they're improving all of the time. If you're new to learning the guitar or any of these things, dance or tennis, are you going to be very good when you first start? No, you're not going to be great. And as you're learning the skills, are you going to be really good really quickly? Can you go to a course for one day and then be really fantastic at tennis the next day and go and play in competition? No, you can't. And yet that's essentially what we're expecting people to do when we send them off to these leadership courses. Okay, and a really interesting TED talk from Atul Gawande, a surgeon, a US surgeon who's done a lot of work around the world with surgery and also improving medical practices, really said something fascinating where he says, if you want to be great at something, at anything, get a coach. And he did it around being his very best as a surgeon. So what does that mean you need to do? Okay, so let's look at some 3 critical steps from a leadership perspective. Again, keeping in the context, this is about developing your skills in these areas so that you can improve every day and continue to be working on it and improving on it. So you need to create, first and foremost, an environment that's based on trust and that is psychologically safe. Okay, and I'll come back to that in a moment. You need to use proven leadership processes for all your leadership skills, okay, such as delegation, giving feedback, difficult conversations, enable people to be at their very best, and so on. What this is like is, imagine if you went to learn to play tennis, you want your tennis coach, the person who's teaching you how to play tennis, to have the best methods for you to learn, okay? You don't want to be learning something that may or may not work for you. That's just something that particular person has decided, well, we'll give this a trial as part of a trial and error process, and you can be a guinea pig, which is kind of what we do when we have the trial and error approach. And then you need to be able to get expert guidance from someone, from a group of people, so that you are consistently every week working on your skills. Okay, so they're building and growing and developing. It's natural for us not to be so good to start with, and then you will get better and better. And if you work on it this way, you'll improve. You'll be on the fast track. You'll improve much, much more quickly than if you go through with the trial and error method or the occasional leadership course method. Okay, and you get to be at your very best. So let's look at all of these in a little bit more detail. Creating a team environment that's based on trust and being psychologically safe. So Google's research from over tens of thousands of people showed that psychological safety was the #1 factor of a high-performing team. Okay, most managers think that they're doing this, and they are trying. Their intention is absolutely to do the right thing about building trust and creating psychological safety. But yet the impact, what's actually happening for the employees, is that it's not working that way. They don't agree. Employees say that managers focus mostly on tasks and the end results. So it seems to the team members that most of the managers are task-orientated, results-orientated, okay? So that means they're not actively or clearly spending enough time creating that psychological safety and building trust, all right? And managers don't realize that small actions can continually be breaking or chipping away at trust. One of the most common ones, as a small example, just one small example, when I'm talking with managers, is about the meetings they have with their direct reports. Okay, so whenever a manager changes the time, is late, cancels, reschedules a meeting with one of their team members, that's breaking trust. It's saying something else is more important than having the meeting and the discussion with you. Okay, it's a small break, it's a little chip in the trust, but it's an example of one of the things that's happening. Now, the managers that I work with, they say, yeah, but I had these other crises happening, or this other thing was really important. Okay, and that's true. So you've got to figure out how this works. But it's just being aware that these sorts of things are what break down trust, and why the research comes back saying that in the employees think managers focus on tasks, not on building the trust and the relationships. All right, so now let's look at the second step. So using proven processes for all of your leadership skills. So mostly managers deal with situations as they come up and ad hoc, but this doesn't develop your skills very well, okay? Because you're dealing with things ad hoc in a way that you think is the right way to handle it in any individual situation. But what happens is that you don't spend enough time reflecting and learning how to develop and grow your skills. So the next time it comes around, you'll handle it similar way, maybe a different way, but you're not really knowing whether one is improving over the other. So your skills aren't developing. Whereas what is going to help you fast track your leadership development is to find proven processes that other people have used over and over again, and you know that is going to get you to be a highly effective leader and is going to improve the performance of your team. And so then what you need to do is just learn how to go about implementing those particular proven processes. You don't have to think about as much about, is this the right way to do it or not? That's now something you already know. It's about growing and developing and using those skills, okay? Because it's still about making sure that you've got to grow those skills. So just thinking about it in a different way, if you were building a house, would you want a builder who figured things out as they went along, no plans? Or would you want one that used a planned, proven, repeatable process? And that's what we want you to do, is build your leadership skills with the same things in mind, with that plan in mind. So you can have proven, repeatable processes for important interactions, like giving effective feedback. Most people don't give effective feedback. Most people don't do delegation very well. A lot of people avoid conflict, okay? And you want to be able to create high performance. Now, these things aren't easy. So it's much simpler to know, right, if I've got a proven method, then I can develop the skills to become good at this. But trying to work out what is the best way to give feedback at the same time as you're trying to figure out how do I develop my skills in giving feedback is very complex and can take quite a long time. Okay. So then the third part is about getting the expert guidance so that you can develop your skills consistently. All right. So most managers focus more on the doing and the tasks than they do on their own growth and development. If you want to fast track to be highly effective as a leader, then you actually need to create some time for yourself to focus on developing and have a consistent path that you're developing these skills and a consistent way that you're doing this. So I encourage you to think about, how do you find some people to support you, to give you that guidance, to hold you accountable, so that you are growing and developing. And that's the quote, again, from our surgeon that I mentioned earlier. If you want to get good at something, get a coach. Now, that you can find a coach in a whole lot of different ways. It could be a group of people, it can be a single person, somebody there or some people who will support you so that you know that you're growing and developing your leadership skills on a consistent basis. Okay. Think about how sports people or sports teams make sure they're at their very best. They don't do it off on their own. They've got a whole team around them, giving them consistent feedback, helping them develop the skills that they need to be at their very best, because they know that's what's required for them to get to be at their best. So one thing for you to think about, just as an example, do you have an authentic leadership vision statement? Most managers don't. So that's even one thing to say. Do you know what your very best looks like? And do you know exactly what you're aiming for to be at your best? Because without that, it's almost impossible to get there. And even with it, it's still a challenge, but one you can certainly achieve. And the accountability is something that's important for you. So think about how can you create that in your world to help you grow and develop with your leadership skills. So here's a couple of comments from people that I've helped over the years. Alex's confidence was consistently up and down in particular, and through the coaching process, through putting in place the things that we've been talking about, His confidence now sits consistently between 8 and 9 out of 10, and he's got a couple of promotions. And Jude, who's a highly educated person, and he was one who was very, very highly skilled and highly intelligent in his area of expertise. He got stuck in doing a lot of the things himself. So he was somebody who really benefited from being able to step away, develop his leadership skills instead of just using his own expertise. So now over to you. Questions and answers. So I'm going to stop the share and give you an opportunity to ask questions. I've thrown a lot of information at you. So what would you like me to go back over? What situations are you in with specific questions that you'd like to ask about? Over to you now. Feel free to type it into the chat. Put yourself off mute. Ask some questions. Even if you've got some specific challenges that you're facing as a manager, as a potential manager, from a leadership point of view, happy to answer any type of questions around management and leadership that you've got and help you in any way that I can today. Yes, very interesting question, which I get quite a lot, Matthew. So Matthew says, what do you do if your manager is not following these principles? Is it possible to coach them? Okay, so the first thing that I always suggest for people, if you're in a management position, and Matthew, maybe you could just let me know whether you are a manager and have a team of your own. So if you do have a team of your own, I always suggest that you start by applying these principles yourself and working to these principles with your team. Okay. Yes, you can influence up, and that's an important part of being an effective leader. Can you coach them? Depending on your definition of coaching, if your manager is not aware that they need to make this change, it's not really coaching. What you can do is be a bit curious and change up some of the interactions and see how they go with that. Matthew, did you want to add to your question?
No, thanks for that, Michael. I guess the situation that I'm in at the moment, I'm like a senior resource, but I don't have a team.
Yep.
And these days I'm kind of probably working in lower sort of level leadership roles than I have in the past.
Okay.
I've kind of got to this point from actually having worked in a few situations that weren't psychologically safe and having a bad experience. So I've kind of taken a step back to a level that I'm more comfortable in working at. But I have had leadership training, I have had coaching, and I have performed leadership roles. So I do kind of see where, like, my own managers and leaders aren't doing sort of leadership role in the way that you're describing it. I've just had my one-on-one with my manager cancelled today. So what you were saying before, eroding trust by it's sort of very pertinent to me right now.
Yes.
And that was really kind of where my question came from. Because when you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, how do I have a conversation with my manager, who actually kind of happens to be sort of a close friend of mine as well, who I've worked with for a long time.
Right.
So it's kind of like, can I actually, for him, be that sort of source of confidential guidance about his leadership style?
Yeah, you absolutely can. So one of the things that you can do here, and I'll put in the context why it's a little bit different from coaching, you can give feedback. Simple, objective, well, it's not quite objective, but it's simple, specific feedback without pushing for any intention that they must change. It's more, here's the feedback for you to reflect on and decide what you want to do with it. Okay. And the feedback in this situation would use a model where it's very simple and it's very short, okay? And it describes the situation, their behavior, and then how you feel, how that impacted you, okay? So that would be, you might, if I was your boss, you would say to me, Michael, so this morning when our one-on-one was cancelled and you cancelled that meeting and I don't know when we're going to reschedule, I felt very disappointed and a little devalued. Okay. And I just wanted to be able to share that with you. How would you feel about sharing that feedback with him or her?
Yeah, I think I would feel comfortable sharing that because I know that like he would value that sort of feedback. So
yeah, so that yep. So that's an example of using a model for feedback and being able to have the courage and increase your influence. In this situation, we're using part of the model because we're passing it on to someone who's senior for them to have the opportunity to do some reflection and decide what they want to do. Because of the hierarchy, it's not a situation where you can try and force them or push them to change, but you can give them the feedback. And the model there is aimed to focus around a specific situation and behaviour, and keep it very simple so that there's less chance that you're going to go off track and that there's going to be a whole side conversation that gets away from the key point that you're trying to get across. Now, yeah, you can, if you're not sure how it's going to go, you can ask permission to give some feedback. And some people do also say to me that unfortunately the culture or the relationship with the person or the manager isn't good enough, that they're not sure that they could do this. The only thing that I say is that if you're looking to influence, to create some change, then this is part of the courage as managers, that we need to be able to find a way to be able to share and give this information. Okay. But another important part of the skills here is also to reach out and ask for feedback. And it's one of the ways that we can improve as leaders as well. And that's part of forming that regular, weekly, growing accountability in terms of developing yourselves on the fast track from a leadership development point of view. Was that helpful, Matthew?
Yes, thanks.
Right. Any other questions?
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Ramez.
Yeah. Hi, yeah. I just have a question for you. I'm in a kind of situation where I kind of try to avoid making a personal or a personal friendship outside of my business with my colleagues,
Mhm.
and I just wanted to know if that's a healthy way to be. I kind of feel like they kind of see me as an outsider and don't get along well with me in the job due to this. I just don't hang out with them after work or attend their parties or anything. So just wanted to know your view on that.
Yeah, so there's no one perfect way to do this, and everyone with their different personalities, and that's another important part for us to understand in developing our leadership, is what are our personality strengths and weaknesses, and how do we utilize those. One thing is important, though, is to get a high performing team, right? You do need to ensure that it feels like you understand each other, that you build a level of trust, and that you show that you're important to each other and that you care about each other. Now that can be almost almost all focused on work. It doesn't have to be that you have to become friends with them outside of work. Um, Usually it does involve sharing something with each other. Okay. And if you're the manager and you've got people who like sharing a lot about themselves outside of work, then you might need to be able to adjust some of your behaviors to share a little bit more than you usually would, or do the occasional thing outside of work with them than you would normally do, in order to build the strong relationship with that team. Okay. If you don't connect with them so that they don't feel like there's any level of personal connection, then that is going to impact the trust. That is going to impact psychological safety. And essentially, from their perspective, they will say, oh, Ramez or Michael, all they care about is work. They don't care about me as a person. And therefore, I don't feel like I really can be at my very best in this team. So I can't tell you exactly what it is that you need to do in different situations, but there are some elements there that require a level of personal connection. How does that sound? Does that
Yeah,
help?
so it is important to establish a personal connection, but I just feel like if I do too much of it, and I have done it in the past, and I've experienced that affecting the relationship of ours in the workplace. Sometimes when you're in a little bit managerial position than them, they kind of take you for granted a few things in a few situations.
Yeah, certainly. I've had many clients who experience that it's challenging to be managing people that are also their friends. Where sometimes they've stepped up from being colleagues and they've stepped up to being managers. Other times, in other ways, they've become friends, and it does complicate things. So building the connection doesn't have to be about becoming friends and getting to know people a lot outside of work. But what it can be is getting to know them a little bit, but also most of that can still be about understanding them at work. Okay.
Yeah.
And talking to them about what they enjoy most about work. What are their strengths? What do they like working on? Where do they see themselves going? How can you help them with what they're most interested in? Noticing when things are going well, giving them positive feedback, noticing when they might be struggling, providing them with support. That's not just about get the next task done. It might be supporting them when they've got some things going on outside of work. You don't have to be their friends or be involved in it, but you can be aware of it so that you know that they know that you will support them on that. You're not a close friend, but that you're there understanding what's happening for them to some extent. Might be flexible work hours when somebody's not well in your household or something like that. So there's sort of ways that don't require you to be friends exactly or to spend a lot of time with them outside of work, but can still help to build the connection with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of that comes back around, like if we just use my example, and Matthew's highlighted it as well, some of that comes back around just to showing that that person is important within the team, the work they do, and how much time you devote to them as part of being their manager in the team.
Yeah.
Good question.
Thanks, Michael.
Any other questions?
Hi, Michael. Good afternoon. This is Terence. Sorry, I joined a little bit late. So I missed
Hi,
the good part.
Terence.
I missed the good part of your session. So I was attracted to your theme question. Uh, I feel like actually doing it myself actually quicker, right,
Yep.
than getting others involved. So that is something that actually I had in my mind as well, right? So not delegating, not it is not just kind of delegating. I feel that I can do it much quicker and much better,
Yep.
right? So how do I come out of that concept?
Yep. Okay. So the first thing there, Terence, thanks. A great question. It's something that comes up for pretty much everyone. The first thing that's a key here is in any one situation, it is easier to do it yourself. It is quicker to do it yourself. All right. You are probably better than most people. So if you take it just one situation, you can see that what we're saying in our head kind of applies. Now, I want you to switch mindset and think about if you want to be an effective leader and manager, and you've got 6 or 8 people in your team, but also if you want to grow, so at some stage you might have a bigger team where there's 10, 20, 30 people, depending on where you want your career to go. How do you think you go if you've got 10 or 20 people and every time there's a situation and you know you could do it better, that you're trying to do that? It's not sustainable, is it?
That's right.
Exactly. And so what actually happens is that people try to do it that way and it leads to burnout. And then eventually it actually leads to you making mistakes that you've never made before, just because you've got such a large workload. Okay. So there's 2 key things from a mindset perspective. So one is when it comes into your mind that it's quicker or easier to do it myself, you've got to then say to yourself, well, what about all of the other situations? Is it always going to be quicker and easier? Can I sustain that? And the answer is no. Right? And then the second part of it becomes about letting go of exactly how you would do it, or that it has to be done your way or get exactly the outcome that you would get. So you want to focus on what is a good outcome and develop and grow and then trust others to be able to achieve that outcome. Okay. So the part of this is when we delegate, the first level of delegation, the first part of delegation is actually about developing our team members to be able to learn and grow. So we need to be the leader who provides coaching and guidance and support for them so that they can learn and grow. And when you see delegation as the way for them to grow, then they'll start doing these tasks and they'll start doing them very well. Maybe not quite as perfectly as you, but they'll start doing them very well. And then you'll have these group of people in your team who can do all of these tasks and get very good outcomes. And they are happy that they're growing and developing and they've got opportunities to take on challenges and they do well. They feel good. You feel good. You've got a high performing team. Now, I'm not saying that's easy and it happens, in a couple of days, but it can happen in just a few months.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate that. And sometimes actually you have to compromise, right? So you get a compromise outcome.
It depends what you mean by compromise. Sometimes you may get an outcome that wouldn't be quite as perfect as if you did it yourself. Yeah. But most of the time you'll get something that is still perfectly acceptable in the context of what you're delivering.
That's right. That's right. So one of the key issues that I am facing right now is actually a concept that I can't say enforce. I like to practice. But some actually they think that their way is right. Okay, now when it comes to those kind of situation, it's very hard because we are dealing with people as well, right? So sometimes, yes, people say that there are 100 ways to skin a cat, right? But always there are efficient ways, right?
Yep.
One or two efficient ways, right? So we need to look at the efficiency, right? Not getting the outcome somehow, right? But we need to get a efficient, sustainable solution, right? So that is something that I'm actually struggling at the moment.
Yeah, I can understand, and that's part of the skills that we're talking about here with the delegation. So that involves being able to let go to a certain extent, but also have the development and coaching conversations so that people can see that there's some ways that are more effective and some ways that are less effective. But what's critical here is it needs to be a two-way conversation where you're getting them to think about it. Because what happens if you just tell them the most effective way, they do your steps without thinking, right? And that way they never learn to really take it on board as if their own and take full responsibility. So you need to give them some scope to do some things their way and have some conversations and challenge them with some of their thoughts so that they come around to using some or lots of your method, but without you just telling them step by step. And then you also got to be flexible enough that you'll let them go with some things that's not exactly the way you would do it. Maybe it's not quite as effective as the way you would do it, but it suits them, and be okay that they've got some of their own input to do it that way, and that's still effective enough.
All right, thanks, Michael. I appreciate that.
No worries at all. And that's why this is part of this, developing the skills that I'm talking about. It's not like that you can get a process to follow for effective delegation and developing people, do it once and it's perfect. It doesn't work that way. It's about being able to do it and repeat it and reflect on it and get some feedback from people and improve and get some more feedback and do it again and improve. But if you do it consistently, you can improve quite quickly. All right. But if you're doing it ad hoc, trial and error all of the time, you improve quite slowly.
That's right.
Thank you for your question.
No worries.
Any last questions before we finish up? No? All done? Well, thank you. I really appreciate you joining me here today. I always love the opportunity to share as much as I can and help people to grow and develop. You've got my contact details on LinkedIn and my email address there, michael@leaderize.net. If there's anything I can do to help, if there's any questions that you've got that come up afterwards, please let me know. And hopefully all the best with going forward with your leadership and management careers, and hopefully we'll chat again some stage down the track. Thank you very much. Lovely to meet you all. Have a great day.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Bye.